Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a really crucial topic. It's often complex, and it impacts so many aspiring medical professionals. We're talking about the specific internship rules for foreign medical graduates, FMGs, especially those, who finish their education during really challenging times like war or global health crises. The situation in Ukraine comes to mind.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating here is how the National Medical Commission, the NMC, has had to sort of adapt. They've had to clarify guidelines to deal with these really unique educational paths. It's not just bureaucracy, right? Mm-hmm. It reflects this balancing act, making sure qualified doctors can practice, but also acknowledging the unprecedented challenges these FMGs have faced. So our mission for this deep dive is really to demystify these NMC guidelines. We're going to look closely at the public notices from December 2023 and June 2024. We'll break down exactly what kind of internship FMGs need to complete, depending on how they actually finish their medical education.
Exactly. That's the core of it. We've got quite a bit of information here, so let's unpack this. Let's get straight into the, I think, 3 most common student scenarios that the latest NMC updates outline. Our goal, it's simple for you listening to walk away with a really clear understanding of what these regulations actually mean for you. Okay, let's dive into the first scenario then. This one's quite specific. So this applies if you perhaps attended online classes for a while, but then, and this is crucial, you went back to your university, maybe for the last 3 or 4 months of your final semester. And during that time, you completed physical practicals, took your final year exam offline in person, and you got a compensation certificate from your university. So what's the NMC saying about this pathway?
Right. So the public notice from June 19th, 2024 is really key here. Clarifies things quite a bit. It says that if your university confirms in writing, using that compensation certificate, that you sufficiently completed your clinical training, physically, on site.
Sufficiently.
Okay. Yeah, sufficiently. Then you're eligible for just 1 year of the compulsory rotating medical internship, the CRMI. And that's, the standard hands-on clinical training required to practice, as laid out in the CRMI Regulations 2021.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The NMC hasn't actually defined a minimum time for this compensation. So what does that flexibility really mean for FMGs whose practical training might have been, compressed because of everything that was going on? Does it mean they trust the university's call on this?
I think it absolutely does, yeah. What's insightful here is the NMC's pragmatic approach. It seems quite practical. Instead of setting some rigid time frame, like 6 months minimum or something, they're placing trust in the university, certifying that the training was sufficient.
Right.
So this suggests, a flexibility that's designed to accommodate different circumstances. They're trying not to impose a one-size-fits-all rule that might, unfairly perhaps, disqualify FMGs who genuinely got the training. So yeah, even if your compensation period was, say, just 3 or 4 months, if your college validates it, certifies it as sufficient, then you should be good for that standard 1-year internship. That's a pretty significant detail.
It really is. Okay, now let's shift gears. Let's move to a different situation. What about where you completed your entire final year of study online, and you also passed your final exams online? This scenario, well, it's seen some notable shifts in the regulations, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. This raises a really important question about how these compensation letters are viewed. Because earlier, according to the June 7th, 2024 notice, compensation letters for this specific group, the fully online final year and exams, were generally being rejected.
Right, I remember that causing some concern.
Exactly. But then, the June 19th, 2024 public notice brought a crucial clarification. Mm-hmm. It says, such certificates will now be accepted, but, and this is a big but, under specific conditions.
Okay, specific conditions. So what does this actually mean on the ground? The clarification says they're valid, but only if they're, quote, backed by genuine on-site clinical training, and you've passed your final MBBS equivalent exams. But what if a university's idea of genuine on-site clinical training is maybe a bit less stringent? Is there a risk of ambiguity, or does the NMC have ways to check beyond just the letter?
That's precisely the point of the clarification, I think. The NMC is making it clear. Yes, the letters might be accepted now, but only if there's real, verifiable, genuine on-site clinical training behind them. And you passed your final exams, of course. So the bottom line is, even if you have that certificate, if you did your course and exams purely online, with no actual physical compensation, no genuine hands-on stuff, you will not be eligible for the 1-year internship. It's a really vital distinction. They're clearly prioritizing, actual hands-on experience. Patient safety has to be paramount.
That makes sense. Okay, for our third scenario, Let's imagine you only went back to your university just to take the final exam offline, but you didn't actually do any physical clinical training during that time. This feels, well, pretty clear-cut, doesn't it? But what are the exact implications?
Yeah, this one's much more straightforward. In this case, you are definitively not eligible for the one-year CRMI. The NMC has made it abundantly clear. An offline exam by itself is simply not enough.
Just showing up isn't sufficient.
Exactly. What's required is that sufficient physical compensation for your training, not just appearing for offline exams. It's almost like, the medical version of show, don't just tell. You need the practical proof.
Okay, so if you fall into this category, what does it mean for your internship requirement then? Longer period.
Yes. This means you'd likely fall under the 2 or possibly 3-year CRMI requirement. The exact duration usually depends on when that academic break happened. If the disruption was mainly in your final year, it's typically 2 years of internship. If it happened earlier, say in your penultimate year, it can extend to 3 years.
Got it.
So the core message, really, across all these scenarios, it boils down to the absolute necessity of verified physical clinical training.
Are there any specific red flags the NMC looks out for when they're verifying these compensation certificates, or is it mainly about the university's word?
Well, the overarching principle is clear. The NMC's focus is on genuine on-site physical clinical training. That June 19th clarification really acts as a safeguard. It protects those FMGs whose training genuinely was offline and properly certified by their universities. But it also aims to filter out those whose experience was purely online and doesn't meet those practical standards. They'd likely look for, detailed attestations, things like clinical hours logged, specific procedures performed, not just a vague statement.
Right. So to really distill this for you, our listener, it's not just about having a piece of paper or certificate. It's about the demonstrable, the verifiable physical training behind that paper. This really highlights how critical it is to keep your documents meticulous, completely in order, and making sure that any compensation for your training was genuinely offline and, crucially, officially certified by your university. Beyond just gathering the documents, are there any practical steps FMGs should maybe be taking right now to sort of future-proof their applications?
That's a good question. I think beyond just collecting papers, FMG should proactively try to understand the nuances of what the NMC considers genuine on-site clinical training.
Mm-hmm.
This could mean ensuring your university certification includes specifics about your practical exposure. The details, not just a general statement saying training was compensated. And it's probably wise just to keep an eye on any further NMC advisories or clarifications. These regulations, as we've seen, can be quite dynamic, especially in response to global events.
Absolutely. Good advice. Okay, and that just about wraps up today's deep dive into these FMG internship regulations. We've covered quite a bit of ground, from the details of compensation certificates to that really crucial distinction between online and offline clinical training.
Yeah, remember, knowledge is only really valuable when you understand it and can apply it. Understanding these specific guidelines is just so crucial for anyone navigating this path. These clarifications, they really show how regulations have to evolve when global events disrupt things like education. And this brings up, I think, an important question to maybe ponder. What kind of impact might these nuanced regulations have on how medical education programs are structured in the future globally? Especially for international students who might face unforeseen disruptions again. Will we see maybe a shift towards, more resilient, perhaps hybrid models, but still ensuring robust in-person clinical training somehow?
That's a really compelling thought, something to definitely mull over as medical education continues to adapt worldwide. We really hope this deep dive has given you some clarity and maybe some confidence too. Stay informed, stay strong, and please know that you're not alone in navigating these sometimes complex waters. Until next time, keep learning.